This is the story of Steinhoff International, a company that went from a global furniture empire to a financial disaster. This is also the story of Markus Jooste, a visionary, a deal maker, and a fraudster who fooled two billionaires in his pursuit of wealth. In this video, we'll dive into the rise, the deceit, and the devastating fall of Steinhoff, including the mysterious end to its controversial CEO. Welcome to Crooks and Suits, where we take a look at some of the world's biggest corporate scandals. My name is Ray. I'm a chartered accountant with 35 years of experience, and I've worked as a chief financial officer across banking and fintech. I find the story of Steinhoff fascinating. I think it is right up there with Enron in a league table of corporate scandals. Like Enron, it involved very sophisticated financial engineering, and like Enron, it is dominated by a very smart and controlling CEO. So in terms of the beginnings, Bruno Steinhoff founded his company in Germany in 1964, based on the simple model of buying furniture cheaply in communist East Germany and selling it in the relatively richer West. Over the years, the company expanded across Europe and began producing its own furniture. By the 1990s, revenues had reached $300 to $400 million, with some 3,000 employees. The fall of the Iron Curtain accelerated growth, with Steinhoff buying undervalued factories in East Germany. In the 1990s, Steinhoff was often compared to IKEA due to their shared focus on low-cost, mass-market furniture, but they were far from direct equals in scale or brand or model. IKEA was a global brand, where Steinhoff remained regional in Germany and Europe. One of Bruno Steinhoff's closest friends was a German industrialist, Klaus Daun, who had bought a number of furniture companies in South Africa, including Goma Goma, a furniture company run by Jooste in the early 1990s. In 1995, Daun arranged for Jooste to visit Germany and meet with Bruno Steinhoff. This led to a joint venture and ultimately a merger in 1998, with a listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, with a market cap of approximately $500 million. Markus Jooste was now the CEO of the group. So let me tell you a bit more about Markus Jooste. He was born in Pretoria, South Africa, the son of a postal worker. He excelled at school and later studied in Cape Town, where he qualified as a chartered accountant. One of his order clients at the time was Pep Stores, owned by Christoph Wiese, also an important name in the story. So what is Jooste like? Outwardly, he was charismatic, aggressive, and an exceptionally convincing leader who built Steinhoff into a global powerhouse, earning a near mythical reputation as a brilliant deal maker and a visionary CEO. But behind the scenes, he was widely regarded as domineering, intimidating, and a bully. He inspired fear rather than affection. He fostered a culture where decisions went unchallenged. He rewarded loyalty and reportedly enjoyed berating those who fell short. Under Jooste's aggressive leadership, Steinhoff transformed into a multinational giant. From 2000 to 2016, revenue exploded from $700 million to $15 billion, with the market cap hitting $22 billion. 24% annual growth rate. At one stage, it was ranked as the fourth most valuable company on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Steinhoff also listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange in 2015. South African investors loved the stock because it gave them exposure to hard currencies rather than an ever-declining South African rand. After the Johannesburg listing in 1998, Jooste managed a period of consolidation with just one acquisition, Pepkor, the biggest South African furniture manufacturer. But soon Steinhoff embarked on an acquisition spree. These included Homestyle and Poundland in the UK, Conforama in France in a $1.2 billion deal, and the oddly named Mattress Firm in the US. The deal spanned the UK, Europe, and Australia. By the mid-2010, Steinhoff was dubbed Africa's IKEA, with operations in dozens of countries, massive revenue growth, and a peak market cap of around $22 billion. But the biggest purchase was Pepkor in 2015, valued at $5.7 billion. Pepkor is a major South African discount retailer, specializing in affordable clothing, footwear, homeware, furniture, appliances, across 5,800 stores, mainly in Southern Africa. They generally focus on low to middle income demographics. Pepkor was largely owned and controlled by Christoph Wiese, one of South Africa's most well-regarded businessmen. He was also already a billionaire through his Pepkor holdings. Wiese later became chairman of Steinhoff in 2016. Interestingly, an analyst, Craig Butters, had met with Wiese some years before and warned him about Steinhoff. He said they had a poor cash flow. They were reliant on generating profits by inflating assets. They had an unusually low tax rate. Their acquisitions were shoddy, and their auditors were anonymous. In retrospect, it was all true. Jooste was not always the brilliant businessman he was portrayed to be. For example, they paid $64 a share for Mattress Firm in the US, compared to a market price of $30. This firm had some 3,500 locations, which is quite a lot since people only change their mattresses every 10 years or so. It also turned out that the Mattress Firm real estate execs had been taking bribes in return for signing overpriced leases and leasing unnecessary stores. Steinhoff also tried to strong-arm Mattress Firm's biggest supplier to reduce prices. The supplier responded by terminating the agreement. This supplier accounted for 40% of the mattress sales. Jooste lived a lavish lifestyle. His passion was horse racing. He was said to have owned some 300 horses. He had a stake in a stud farm, and he was involved in operating stables in South Africa and abroad. He also had a number of properties, including a family home in Stellenbosch, a historic university town an hour from Cape Town, a mega mansion in Amarnis, a seaside town, a mansion in 7 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a heated indoor pool, a spa, a library, and panoramic sea views. He also owned the lovely Landsrek wine estate in Stellenbosch. He travelled extensively on his company private jet. To complicate things further, his personal life included a high-profile extramarital affair. So what is the actual fraud? There were 2 aspects to the fraud. There were side deals where Jooste benefited personally, and fictitious transactions that inflated assets and profits for Steinhoff. I'll come to the side deals later. The mechanics of the fraud comprised fake third-party deals, asset overvaluation, and circular funding. Executives would decide what revenues they needed to meet market expectations. Jooste would then create a fake invoice such as 200 million euros rebate payable by a shell company. Jooste told the board that retailers and suppliers would meet once a year in Europe to negotiate rebates. This is entirely untrue. These shell companies had names like Talga, TG Group, and Triton. Over time, this amounted to 6.5 billion euros, and the resulting debts were never paid. These shell companies were secretly controlled by Jooste, but the structures were so convoluted it would have been very difficult to determine actual ownership. The debts were later lost through clever accounting, using intergroup payments, debt assignment, or classified as intangible assets such as goodwill and trademarks. This gave the impression to the auditors that it had been paid. They also did supposed branding deals. Steinhoff would sell his brands to a supposed brand management company, usually GT Global Trademarks, and then book an immediate profit, which they could not have done if the brands had stayed in the group. GT would then earn royalties from Steinhoff. In this case, GT was controlled by Jooste. These fake revenues were often shuffled around the group to give the pretense that certain loss-making businesses within Steinhoff were profitable. Over time, Steinhoff had also acquired a number of physical properties through its acquisitions. For example, one such deal was called Hemisphere, owned by Jooste's associates. Steinhoff sold properties to Hemisphere for an inflated price, allowing Steinhoff to book a profit. The deal was then never settled, and finally Steinhoff reacquired ownership, allowing them to retain the fake gains. This was a very sophisticated fraud perpetrated by very smart people. Jooste had a number of external accomplices who ran these off-balance sheet companies. Jooste also personally benefited from a number of side deals. One such deal was Alverglen, controlled by Jooste. Alverglen acquired a property, signed a lease contract with Steinhoff in order to get bank financing, and later sold it at a considerable profit back to Steinhoff, with Jooste pocketing the difference. He did the same for some South African forestry plantations, selling it back to Steinhoff at 5 times the original price. There are 37 documented instances of side deals. He was thought to have earned up to $45 million this way. To be fair, he had an expensive lifestyle to maintain. So how did it all unravel? Over the years, Steinhoff displayed multiple red flags. I mentioned Craig Batters earlier, an analyst who had met with Visa as far back as 2009. There were also other analysts who doubted Steinhoff, but they were in the minority. Jooste dismissed and bullied analysts who questioned Steinhoff, often labeling them as biased or uninformed to protect the growth hype. You see this behavior across every fraud. Steinhoff unraveled in late 2017 when the auditors Deloitte refused to sign off on the 2017 accounts due to unprovable irregular transactions. These transactions amounted to some 6.5 billion euros. Some of them had been carried forward from previous years and should have been spotted earlier. One such transaction was a phantom $800 million brand purchase by Sir Simmers, a mattress manufacturer. These were big numbers. Deloitte met with Chris Visa, now the chair, and asked for evidence to support a number of transactions, largely booked in the European operations. Visa summed Jooste. He was full of his usual bluster. The documents had already been provided many times, etc. Jooste then promised he would immediately fly to Germany to arrange the necessary documents. He did in fact fly to Germany, but it was a prior arrangement to attend Bruno Steinhoff's 80th birthday. He then texted Visa on Monday the 4th of December to say he had the documents and he was coming in shortly. But he never turned up. The next day, he emailed a number of friends apologizing for his big mistakes and vowing to take the consequences. The board demanded a meeting, promised he would attend, but he never turned up. That evening, Steinhoff were forced to announce irregularities had been found and Jooste had resigned. So what is the fallout? Over the next few days, the share price tanked 96%. The market cap fell from 20 billion euros to 500 million euros. The Public Investment Corporation that manages South Africa's government employees' pension fund lost some $670 million. At this stage, Steinhoff had 12,000 stores, 50 factories around 30 different countries, and 130,000 people. The subsequent investigation took years. Jooste never fully explained what happened. He was summoned to Parliament in 2018 to explain. He blamed others, such as Christoph Wiese, the chairman, Dirk Schreiber, who was head of Europe, Andreas Seifert, an Austrian businessman he considered an enemy, and the auditors. He portrayed Steinhoff as a global giant, overwhelmed by complexity. Jooste retreated to his house in Hermanus. In March 2024, 7 years later, an arrest warrant was issued for Jooste. On the very same day, he was issued with a 475 million rand regulatory fine. The following day, Jooste took his own life. At the time, his death was filled with conspiracy theories, with unanswered questions about witnesses and post-mortems and his burial. Steinhoff didn't fully survive as an operational entity. It underwent massive restructuring and was delisted from both exchanges. Subsidiaries such as Pepkor, which was their strongest brand, were sold. Steinhoff had a strong board, with Christoph Wiese as chairman, one of the greatest African businessmen ever. It included Steve Boyson, former chief executive of Absa, a large banking group, Johan van Zyl, CEO of Sanlam, and Dr. Ken Lerner, a renowned governance expert. They all trusted Jooste implicitly. The question that has never been answered is why no one ever blew the whistle inside Steinhoff. With Enron, Theranos, Madoff, they were all whistleblowers. Wiese later sued for losses as he had swapped his Pepkor shares for Steinhoff shares. He managed a partial recovery. Founder Bruno Steinhoff distanced himself from the scandal, publicly criticizing Jooste in 2018 for tarnishing the family legacy. Ben Lagrange had served as CSO from 2013. He was sentenced to 5 years for fraud and corruption, but he was suspended, so he avoided jail. 2 of the European conspirators were also sent to jail in Germany. So why did Jooste do this? To meet his ambition, for personal enrichment, and maintain an aura of invincibility. He seemed to me to have no moral compass. He had been happy to enrich himself at the expense of his shareholders. And once he headed down this road, there was just no going back. Jooste's domineering culture stifled dissent, enabling fraud to fester. Wiese has publicly called Jooste a clever schemer who managed to defraud top business people, including himself, as well as the auditors, the regulators, and the rating agencies. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Crooks in Suits. Please leave me a like and subscribe for more stories.